Welcome to Making Our Way Forward, a podcast where we share compelling life stories and learn from the experience of everyday entrepreneurs. At NACCE, we celebrate diversity and invite you to join the conversation as we talk to entrepreneurs and leaders from all walks of life. We hope that by telling their stories, we bring you inspiration, empower you to take action, and ignite entrepreneurship in your community. Welcome to Making Our Way Forward podcast. We're happy to be coming to you today from our studio in Raleigh. And joining us is a colleague and friend, Mike Moss, who is the president of an organization called SCUP. And Mike and I got acquainted through one of the NACCE champions who does a lot of leadership work out in Arizona. So we'll get to that. But I want to welcome you, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and continue to build our friendship and our partnership as we continue to look at what higher ed's going to do. It's going to be amazing.
That's great. And we were speaking a little earlier this morning about putting together puzzles. So full disclosure, I am not a good puzzle assembler, but I enjoy watching my colleagues that are good at them so that we frame them and put them in our office. So that's just one more way that we're making our way forward. But I'm excited to talk to you today, and I got a chance to learn about your background. So rather than reading your lengthy bio, why don't you share with us a little bit about your career journey, Mike, and what brought you to SCUP and what you're working on at SCUP?
Thank you. So I'm actually an association lifer. So I became a nonprofit employee right out of college in 1992 and have worked for regionals, international, states, national only, and had a really blessed career and a lot of opportunity to grow how I want to approach learning. I think the most important part of my journey, not just that it's been in the nonprofit realm, has been the people who I've had the good opportunity to serve with. And right out of the gate, 1992, I was set up with members and volunteers and associates who were stewards of learning, which is now just, we all talk about lifelong learning and continuous learning, but to have actually understood that that's what happened, I do everything I can to make sure that's part of the mantra wherever I work for both the employees, the volunteers, and certainly for the members. The opportunity to come to SCUP came almost 7 years ago. And I actually am married into a Michigan family, and we are located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so I think there was some serendipity involved with the opportunity to not only come to an amazing group like SCUP, but to also come back home, raise my son here in Michigan, who's now a freshman at Michigan State. So it was an opportunity to reconnect both with family, but also with passions around learning. Obviously, SCUP being a higher ed association, it really started to put personal energy, personal passions, and professional opportunity into the same movement.
That's great. And I can see how you blend friendship and family into your career. I do exactly the same thing. I think for me personally, even the pandemic was a challenge because I have so many good friends at NACCE. We work together, we are learning together. We are just lifelong friends, and I've missed a lot of them, but we continue to connect. So 2 other fun things we have in common. It too is my 7th year as the president and CEO of NACCE, and my daughter Rachel just got accepted to UNC Wilmington. So she's super excited.
That's awesome.
She texted me. So we have college student children. But let's talk a little bit about a conversation that we were having about learning. And I know you are an avid book reader, so you were telling me a little bit earlier about one of the books that you have enjoyed reading. So why don't you share with us a little bit about that? And those who are tuning in may want to pick up that book too.
Yeah, thank you. So oftentimes in my reading cycles, there's always, you want to get the newest, the latest, the forward, but sometimes it's really important to circle back. And the pandemic, I think, and its effect on SCUP has helped me really kind of rethink some of our modeling and some of our programming in ways that are transformative for what we aspire to do as a mission. So I've been able to revisit the book Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. And I think that helped us reimagine and maybe fully embrace the entrepreneurial spirit of planning, as opposed to the practitioner established practice and, evolution of expand and defend. We've been able to actually, I think, to reimagine how planning can be actually transformative as it's designed, and then help organizations not only like ourselves, but obviously those we serve, have that mindset of scaling up, even though we were under about the most duress I can possibly imagine us ever being under. It seemed like the opportune time to revisit that book, and it's thinking about taking advantage of what you have when you have it to move the next piece forward. And whether it was learning, whether it was membership, or whether it was just simply cash management, having that opportunity to revisit the thinking under duress, I think was extremely helpful for us. And it's actually helped, honestly, it's helped us really launch a few new things that have been long in the queue, but short on delivery. And now we're here and we're able to bring these things forward in 2021.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. What you talked about focusing in on what's in front of you. In NACCE language, entrepreneurial language, we call that our bird in hand. And I'm one who tries to practice that as well. And that maybe is another thing that we have in common. NACCE had the same experience. There were a lot of things that we had talked about doing, digital badging and so on, but we hadn't done the deep work because we didn't have time. We were planning in-person events, we're traveling, we're working on membership. So it is looking at those opportunities and thinking about innovation. Now, another thing that you had mentioned that we talk a lot about in our work as association executives, but also as people that are deeply curious about others, is really that opportunity to build networks. And I think our organizations individually and hopefully jointly as we move along, we'll do this together. But what brought me or what brought you to NACCE and to our podcast was one of the active NACCE members who is on your board. So we share this person. So I thought maybe you could share a little bit about our common leader and friend and talk a little bit about how, that has been for you to have leadership like that on your board.
Oh, absolutely. And absolute huge shout out to Paul Dale, who is just an extraordinary leader and also an extraordinary connector. And Paul is in his second year of service on our board. And what I really appreciate about his approach is the mindfulness by which he listens and then establishes connections. And then once connected, he's there to help grow. But he has that mindset of ready, set, go. So once he connected us, which was amazing, and I'm so excited about all the stuff that's going to come in the future for our two organizations together. Paul then knows to go on to the next, and he's been continuing to connect SCUP into new markets, new members, new opportunities, just from a mindset of connecting people who are passionate about learning, about higher ed, and about planning. And I think his attention, I've really learned a lot from him. He'll hear this and realize now that he's actually, mentoring me. He just didn't know it. But the way that he listens and the way that he can establish a connection to an idea, to an opportunity, to an action, I think is something that is unique. It's unique for us to have that on our board at this moment of high duress. I think everything came together really, really nicely. And I really appreciate what Paul does, not just for us, but for the higher ed community. His willingness to share his network is something that is really important, because at SCUP, as a planning community, we don't just help those who have planner in their title, right? It's about planning, and all of us do planning, whether we know it or not, whether we're invited to the table or not. We are constantly planning. And we really want to embed that through collaboration over competition. And that's, I think, a mindset that Paul's helped us really establish in our model here, which is let's collaborate, let's not compete. And I think out of that, our partnership network has just expanded, tremendously during this last year, and in very meaningful ways, not just a numbers game, but in a way that is establishing opportunities that we only had in our aspiration pile, maybe in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, there's so much that you said there that is so rich and thoughtful. And I do believe, in terms of leadership and the people, like we were talking about families and so forth and friends. One of the things that I've observed about Paul, he was our entrepreneurial president of the year in 2019 and was honored, is that he's very humble too. He was almost kind of, a little shy about accepting that, because I hear that over and over and over again across the country, that a lot of presidents and leaders and planners and other people say, I'm not doing enough, or this is all I'm doing. And as one who, sort of observes and tries to document best practices and also connect people together, I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit, for just being in the game and just throwing things out there and see what sticks. The other piece, although you didn't use the words, I would say from what I've learned from you and Paul and others in our communities is really that dedication to servant leadership. You set the vision, and then you sort of step back, you put things in place to hold people accountable. And I think that that's really important. It's hard to let go sometimes, because at least it is for me. Like, I want to be in there, and as we've, as I imagine you have done every job literally in the organization. You can do every job in the organization, but that's not your role.
Right.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something you shared with me, which is stuck in my mind. And I'm hoping we can do some fun iteration of this at the NACCE conference in Minneapolis in early October. But is your concept of the garage. And I liked that metaphor, because I think about like my grandfather and other people that would go out into the garage and tinker with things, or would save things because they might want to make something out of it later. So Mike, tell us a little bit about your vision for the garage, what you do with that as an organization, and helping you and your team make your way forward.
Yeah, so this is where things got fun, right? So last fall, our board started a series of retreats that were focused. We have 4 main goals, and we were focusing on one goal, doing a deep dive, hard work, get it through the plan, think about what it might look like, X years out. And we'll call the Horizon 2030. So the one we were doing last fall was specific to learning and how we might imagine learning futures for SCUP members and higher ed as a whole. And Hannah Stewart Gambino from Lafayette College is on our board. And we were talking about, we wanted to have an incubator, we wanted an innovation hub, we wanted to catch up in some regards to the thinking that was being done in other organizations and within our membership. And Hannah brilliantly brought forward the idea of, yes, we're going to have a hub and we're going to treat it like a garage. And the example is exactly as you described. We have a garage, a proverbial garage, across the parking lot from headquarters, where I am currently, which is where we ideate and we construct, deconstruct, actually make things go horribly wrong without anyone knowing. But it's all under the guise of course, bringing the innovation piece back into integrated planning, and then having the stories told. So the main thrust of the garage right now is capturing the experimentation and the innovation in the planning community for stuff that is long from being established practice, let alone best practice, and having those conversations come forward. As you know, I mean, most of our members are doing some really thoughtful, awesome, amazing experiments on their campus. And we often are hesitant to talk about those until they become established practice, because then there's some metric of success and you can replicate it. The garage is not about that. The garage is about capturing in short mode content the story, whether it went horribly well or horribly wrong. It's an amazing story for our community to learn from. So the learning resource there has no learning outcomes. It is not an established course. It's not going to be a workshop. Obviously, it's short mode content, storytelling, what went well, what went wrong, and why. And we have a number of members who are capturing their recordings now. And what we're finding, and what we're really excited about with the garage, is it's bringing forward long-standing, challenging topics that all of our members have, regardless of institutional size or structure, that are hard to address. And some of those are certainly racial and social justice oriented. Some are related to the unfortunate circumstances around sexual assault cultures. And we're finding this is a place where we can have those really challenging conversations, because we're not beholden to a established practice or some other sort of moment that we traditionally present at a SCUP conference. It's a place for a shared opportunity in safe harbor to have a conversation, connect with other members, because if there's one, there's 100 of us trying to solve a relatively similar problem. So that's what we're most proud of in our first little sprint here, is we've been able to bring out, these are really challenging moments and these are really challenging problems. And here's some ways that we're trying to experiment with that. As integrated planners, what we really appreciate about it is it's bringing together other pieces of the academy outside the traditional planning table. So students, faculty, community, all pieces of the academy are brought in very interesting ways into these experiments to figure out how to bring forward a more durable piece to the official planning capacities of the organization. It's really cool.
That is really cool. And I loved it the way you described it to me the first time, and just learning more about how you're doing this and really leaning into a space where people can be very entrepreneurial. It reminds me a bit of design thinking, where you're leaning in with empathy and your whole person. So, while you might be the president of your organization, your voice has equal measure and weight as maybe a student who is early on in their journey and doesn't have all that experience. And I've just seen sort of the magic of a lot of that, and I think that that's something that our association could really learn from you. And I think the other thing is, as you were talking, I was thinking about how difficult it is for young people. We talked about our children, our young adult children, and I think what I've observed with students, whether they're related to me or not, is that feeling of being judged and evaluated. And I think the further you get on in your career, I know we all have boards, and it's always that, time where you get evaluated by 15 people, and it's uncomfortable because you know you're doing the best job possible, but there are things that didn't go perfectly. So creating a space where innovation and really bad ideas are just as important as good ones, so that you can sort through that is a really critical piece of the puzzle. And I wonder, are there specific, if you had to maybe name one or two challenges or things that your association members needed that you've ideated in the garage, would you mind sharing maybe an example of a problem that you tackled and what you came up with?
Yeah, so I think we're still in the process of bringing it forward, but one of the interesting things, that's a great question, and where my first thought went is it actually created a partnership. So when the garage was being assembled in context last fall, a very challenging approach to the fact that there was other organizations, other associations our size, leading from the middle, who were feeling completely left out from the conversations about change and the post-pandemic opportunities that campuses will have to thrive, where they just felt like they were being excluded from those conversations, and that it was becoming the traditional higher echelon's job to solve that, right? And so out of that, there's two other associations, and we came together, and we're actually forming a completely new entity. The three organizations are to address a humanistic approach to planning and basically leading from the middle. But it's bringing together student affairs, auxiliary services, planning, housing, a bunch of different sectors into a single entity to really together work as communities. And so what we're, again, collaboration over competition. If you belong to one of the groups, cool, you're in. Right? You don't have to pay again. It's not another fee-based service. It's actually an opportunity that you've come in one of the front doors. So instead of just our community of 4,000 members, it's ours plus, plus, plus. And so now maybe we got 8 to 12,000 people in this community to solve these problems, to look at the future and say, this pandemic, yes, and there'll be something else. Don't forget we already had enrollment challenges. Don't forget we had other issues of social and racial equity. Don't forget climate change. And making sure that we have a community that is together, all together stronger. So as we worked, that was one thing that we didn't see coming out of the garage, was actually making partnerships. We knew the storytelling would come, the opportunity to bring new leaders' voices forward, and now with these other groups. And then the other piece that's come up is there's opportunities to, and we haven't really publicized a lot of this. This is probably the most public talking of the garage yet, right? So I appreciate it. But one of the things that's really come forward is there are a number of folks who want to bring their hubs into our hub so that we can have, just like in that other entity, collaboratively we work better together. So let's bring the hubs together and get out of competition and get into collaboration. And I think that's obviously one of the reasons why you and I have become so fastly connected, is that we share that mindset. And that's what the garage is really bringing to SCUP, is clearly planning is collaborative, it's teamwork, it's a contact sport, it's all those amazing things that happen as you drive change. And at the same time, it becomes, at times, it can become a little systemic and episodic, and every 3 to 5 we do this, and every 3 to 5 years we do that. And it starts to become part of a pattern that every once in a while just needs to be knocked a little sideways. Not recommending a pandemic, but just change happens. But does it happen incrementally, or is it intentional, and is it transformative? And out of the garage, we're finding there are many, many people in the academy who want to see transformative change. They just didn't know where to put their voice. So we're hoping that we can continue to provide those avenues.
And, you had mentioned just briefly about, equity, inclusion, and diversity. And I think being intentional about having those voices at the table and becoming more informed. One of the things that we've really been blessed at NACCE is to have a growing number of historically Black colleges and universities and minority serving institutions join our ranks. And what's really interesting is they are some of our most active members, because NACCE is like a new toy for them. Like they're like, wow, community college is in your name, but you're embracing us, and people are surprised to learn we have a growing number of universities. But it is sort of that cross-pollination of ideas, and there are some, like Benedict College in South Carolina. I spoke with their president the other week, and my goodness, she's a first generation African American woman who 85% of her students are Pell eligible. So, she has so much more in common probably with community colleges than she does with your average, university. So she's finding a home. And to your point about networks of networks, I really believe that that's the future. We were invited to solicit some or to express some ideas to the Small Business Administration about how they could really accelerate the impact, the good work that they're doing. And that was one of the ideas that one of our little groups came up with, is like, how could you network networks? Even if you look at your organization and mine, the strength of us partnering together is so much greater, because what are we doing? We're aligning around a shared value and culture and mission, which isn't really in every organization. So you have to really seek out people that fit. So
That's
I did
awesome.
want to share for a second, one of the books that I'm reading along with my colleagues is The Common Path to Uncommon Success. So we were fortunate enough to receive some copies of this book. So it's going to be something we're going to announce later, is a book reading club. So maybe you and your members will join us in that
nice.
respect. But I wanted to just read a quote to you that kind of reminded me a lot of you and Paul and my board. And I haven't met your other board members, but I'm imagining them too. Is Albert Einstein said, try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. And I think over the years, I've really learned that. And it doesn't matter sometimes if we're not in a race, like you said, a competition. If something that we do helps you as a person or your family or your community or your association to thrive, that makes me feel good. And I think, how can we mentor students and others and younger professionals to learn that at an earlier age? Because you reach that point where, you've had some career success, you've got some influence, and probably the greatest thing that we can do is really impart that to the next generation. So on that note, Mike, because our time has gone by so quickly, I did want to close out by asking you maybe to reflect and share a little bit about what, and you've done this already to some degree, of the experience for your association with the pandemic, but maybe lean in and talk to us a little bit about what you're most hopeful about going into, the middle of 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, one of the things that I will look back on and be most proud of is we made 2 commitments about 2 weeks into the lockdown last March, which was obviously to keep SCUP here and keep everyone employed. And we've had to do the same adjustments as many have, but we have been able to retain our staff and in full throughout the pandemic. And the reason that matters is obviously for the humanistic side of it, that hugely matters, but it also matters because it gave the board and the staff an opportunity to accelerate our strategic plan and not put anything on hold or otherwise defer. And with that acceleration, what we're most excited about is that we really are, as we've talked about with our connection now. I mean, we're opening up new avenues that we've long pined for, but didn't quite know how to do. And we've been put into a situation where we're cool to test and fail fast and fail cheap and fix it again and do the next one. And out of that, we're bringing community-based product forward, meaning your dues have already paid for it. So here you go. Let's get connected. Let's get together. Let's learn. We're also finding a way that I think, we didn't quite understand. I don't think we undervalued, but we didn't understand the willingness of our members to share their experiences and actually do transferable skills to the next generation of either student learners or members. And having an intentional approach to that is what we're really excited about as we head into 21, into 22, is that network of nodes, right? The mesh network is coming. And with all of us working differently in that network of networks, as you described it so well, I think that transferable skills from folks like myself, who might be in the last 20% of their career, to those who are just entering the first 20 weeks of their career, I think there's a really strong understanding now of why we are here to do that, why associations in particular are designed to do that. So focusing on the associate part of that and getting us together, transferring those skills, it's going to be very exciting, because out of that, higher education's durability, its importance, everything will be understood and related to our communities. And out of that, we'll thrive well into the next decade. Higher ed will thrive.
Beautiful. That is really, really powerful. And if people want to learn more about SCUP, your organization, or the Garage, where could they find you online?
We are at scup.org, scup.org. And would love to, there's plenty of places on there for you to connect with either myself or one of my team members. We'd love to hear from you, because out of ideas comes momentum. And whether you're a member or not, share where you're at, share what you're doing, and we'll meet you where you are.
That's really great. And a little fun announcement, not only for our podcast listeners, but for our members and anybody really that wants to participate in the NACCE conference. This year, we're going to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which isn't too far from the state of Michigan. I mean, geographically compared to other places. And we are really excited. Mike has agreed to join us and not only deliver sort of a keynote, but help us facilitate a session where we're going to have community college presidents, some of our HBCU presidents as well, come with a couple members of their staff and learn through a series of engagements that he and others are going to present, that are going to allow us really to move forward as a community of not only nonprofit associations, but colleges and community members. That's really the philosophy of NACCE, is really there is a place for everyone. And that's our mission. Jeff Smith, Natalia, and I, as sort of the lead podcast team, we want you, if you're listening to this, to know that, you know, your talents and abilities, it doesn't matter how many or how few or any degrees that you have talents and abilities. And we want you to feel that there's a place for them, either in community colleges or in associations that serve communities. So with that, Mike, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to meet you in person in Minneapolis. And I would encourage all of our listeners to subscribe to the Making Our Way Forward podcast on your preferred platform. And be sure to visit NACCE.com, NACCE.com, to learn more about us. And you can get in touch with me or any of our staff if you have any other questions. So wishing everybody a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that listening to this podcast will help you to explore the many ways we might define entrepreneurship. Join us every other Wednesday for more episodes as we celebrate opportunity, learn from one another, and grow together. Subscribe to this podcast, connect with us on social media, and learn more about today's speakers at nacce.com/podcast. We look forward to making our way forward together with you.